And
My name is Heather. Thank you so much for joining us today. For this very special afternoon at the theater, we are going to hear all about a brand new musical called Alice, formerly of Wonderland. We've got the writer and director here. I've got a co-host, which I'm very excited about. Now, before I introduce those three gentlemen to you, however, we're going to share a video. This is some of the, actually, it's the entire cast of Alice, formerly of Wonderland, talking a little bit about their characters. We thought maybe you'd like to see a little background of this play, since I imagine many of you have not seen it. So give me one moment here, and I'm going to cue that up for you. And then we'll be back in 3 or 4 minutes, and I will introduce our panelists then. One sec.
I think what a lot of people don't know is that Alice from the books, Alice in the Wonderland, was based off of a real girl. She's really fun to play because she is not what people are expecting. She is feisty, she's funny, she's super mischievous. She will climb her way into a building if she's not allowed, because as a woman growing up in this time period, there's so many things that we aren't allowed to do. And Alice is a fun character because she's got that famousness. She breaks the rules.
Alice and Leopold, you know, everybody in the shows, everybody's dreaming. Everybody's a bunch of dreamers in this show. Leopold really kind of dreams about getting out and meeting someone, just meeting normal people in general. Alice is very much still like dreaming about being in the Wonderland and, like, you know, all the fame that comes from that. And I think her kind of precociousness and, like, she treats him like kind of a normal guy, which he has not been used to, and Leopold is very, very taken by that.
Queen Victoria in history is known as being a very fun and fun-loving person. And I think that's so relieving to get to play as an actor, that you get to play somebody who actually has a sense of humor, though they are known for being a monarch. This play is beautiful because Mark has written in a way that we sort of pull back the curtain on what that monarchy actually is and see the person that's part of that monarchy. And so we get to have a little bit of fun with our queen.
Henry Little was the dean of Christ Church College at Oxford and was the father of Alice Little, who is that Alice from the books. And I have a whole college to run in this play, but she gives me a lot of challenges. And I find what I think is a good suitor for her. I think, like a good doting father, I see some of the local chaps here, and I think I see what might be a good match for her. And she wants none of this. And sometimes I think it's just because I'm her father and she wants to spite me for that.
Edward Brockett is, he is an Oxford star athlete. He is very, very smart. He's very good at his studies. He studies biology. He is also the leader of the Og Singers. He's basically the person you would probably vote class president. But he is a very interesting character because there is this idea that, you know, you have the jock and he's sort of the dumb jock, but this guy is not. This guy is sort of an intelligent jock, singer, athlete, and it's a fascinating combination.
So the character of the caterpillar is the only character in the entire piece who lives in an I think they wrote it as an Oxfordian wonderland. So they very much balance in what we are assuming is Alice's imagination. It's the only time you really see the caterpillar there is when Alice comes up to him to confide, to get advice, to bring gossip to. But he very much exists as this omnipotent character who kind of spreads throughout all different realities, whether it is Wonderland, where we find him sitting on his mushroom, all the way to Alice's reality in the real world as a real woman in Oxford. This caterpillar character is so fun because he's kind of all-seeing, all-being, and he knows that too. And he loves that.
An Oxfordian Wonderland. I love that. All right, so hopefully you have a little bit of an idea now of what this new musical is about. So I am going to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panel. We have the writer of Alice, formerly of Wonderland, Mark Saltzman here. He began his career with Jim Henson writing for the Muppets, which of course is very exciting. He's won 7 Emmy Awards for Sesame Street, and his long and successful writing career consists of countless credits for the stage, movies, and TV. The director of Alice, formerly of Wonderland, Jim Fall, has had a distinguished and diversified career himself, directing career spanning over 35 years, including theater, film, and TV. And how varied is it? He directed the indie fave film Trick and also Disney's The Lizzie McGuire movie. And when I tried to think of who is the perfect co-host for today, only one name came to mind: Daniel Rover Singer, the former Walt Disney Imagineer, current freelance writer, designer, and event producer. And he also created the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged, which has performed around the world since his debut in 1987. And he is, of course, a longtime member of the Lewis Carroll Society of North America. So gentlemen, why don't you go ahead, say hello, show your faces to your adoring public. There they are.
Public.
Welcome. And I will go ahead and make myself scarce, but I am here if you need me.
Thank you, Heather. And hey, everybody in Zoom land, and say hello to Mark and Jim.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. This new show got a world premiere in Santa Barbara in June, ran for 3 weeks, and it was a beautiful production. Mark, you just must have been absolutely glowing with the technical support, the production, the ensemble. It was all really impressive.
Yes, I'm still glowing. That was Harry Feiner who did that design, and oh well, for this audience, he was inspired in his visuals not by John Tenniel, but the other Alice illustrator, Arthur Rackle, and he used that palette, that sort of dark pastels, and the botanical motifs, and we got this gorgeous set from Harry and Sir Arthur.
That's great. It was a really fun evening of theater for its story, for its visuals, for its music, and we'll get into all of those. But let's take a step back and just sort of talk about the theme of the show, if in case that opening video didn't make it clear. This is about 20-year-old Alice Little and her romance with Prince Leopold, who was an undergraduate at Oxford for 4 years. So the show was set in 1872, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And does it sort of compact the whole 4 years that Leopold was studying there at Christ Church into sort of one period of time, or does it pretty much occupy like a year in their lives? What sort of time element is involved?
Oh, I guess you'd say theater time. I mean, we say 1872 because that's when he matriculated. And however long that romance endured until it, ended, maybe it was a year, maybe it was 2, but it's really the timeline is the events of their romance.
Right.
I don't think there was any like specific. We even played a little bit fast and loose with the fashions of 1872, and it is, Mark put it well, it's theater time. There wasn't, I mean, it could have taken place over a month. I mean, it's in some way, it's historical fiction in a lot of ways, so we're not really sure exactly, right? I mean, how long, if it even really happened.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there are a few historians tuned in today. Don't let that worry you. We're not here to grill you on the history of the show.
I embrace my stupidity.
A lot of dramatists in the world, myself included, we love to expand on true events because we're fascinated by how humans behaved in the past, especially if they're famous or if they did something notable. I love to write about subjects like this, and this is a classic example of a story that is to be mined from really just a few details or facts. So, Mark, do you just want to take a moment to talk about what what you feel is historical about the story, or maybe what research you did to try to discover more?
Well, my favorite element of the research was visiting Oxford for the first time. That was absolutely inspirational, and some of my reactions I put into the mouth of Leopold, that he says Oxford is Wonderland to him because he's been in his royal bubble, and this is really his first time living apart from the family and being in this really magical, and it is Wonderland almost literally. And as far as, and the people on this call may help me here, but I was intrigued by the fact that so much of Oxford popped up in the Alice books. That there's an actual shop on High Street that's now the Alice shop, and Tenniel drew that shop. You know, an Oxford shop. There seemed to be some opinions that the Mad Hatter, that face was somebody at Oxford, not necessarily a Hatter, but just a familiar face. And it's full of those kinds of references. The more you look, the more you find that, oh, well, this was a little in-joke for Reverend Dodgson and his chums and the kids. Like, oh yeah, I know that shop. You know, that it wasn't written to be this global phenomenon. It was just, let's have a little fun with Oxford and English politics, the Lion and the Unicorn looking like Disraeli and Gladstone. You know, it was just very insular, very much, you know, in its own ear about Oxford and England at the time. So that research really helped. That you know, we used the caterpillar as our one Wonderland character, and reading it through this lens, he's extremely Oxfordian in his attitude. He's such an insufferable snob, you know, and the "Who are you," which became his kind of mantra, is considered, I don't know, like in the Disney cartoon, a punchline. But if you put it in the context, that's the way any Oxford student would address another student coming towards him, is, if not out loud, in his head, who are you? Are you worthy? Are you merely the son of an earl, or might you be the son of a duke? Who are you? And there's, you know, such snobbery, you know, the kind of thing that Americans get very uncomfortable around, even though many of us are snobs, Jim included.
Well, that Oxfordian quality really shines in the show. In terms of historical details of storytelling about Alice Little, the Little family, Queen Victoria, Prince Leopold, did you find yourself digging through libraries looking for more information about their lives or their interactions?
Libraries, do they still have those?
Okay, never mind. I'm guessing that these
You mean
bookshelves
Google?
behind you are one of those green
The
screen.
Google library, yes.
Okay.
What-
So not a whole lot of historical research available on this subject?
Oh, tons of it. Yeah, you know, I mean, through books and Google and being at Oxford, and my tour guide at Oxford was I can't think of his whole name. His first name was Mark, and he's written he's a Lewis Carroll expert, and he guided me through and got me into situations and spots within Oxford I could never have access to. And he opened the door. He showed me the actual deanery, and this is the door, and this is the garden door. And if you recall, Tenniel drew that door, and it was amazing. And he also pointed, he knew what I was writing about, and he showed me where there's not a lot of hard facts about this romance between Leopold and Alice, but one thing is, he did take out a boat with her and pumped it up the Thames, and that seemed to be, from all the history, an actual event. And he said, well, in that time, this is where you launched a boat from, and he took me there, and there were swans, and it was just the most romantic spot, and that had to be seen. I knew that had to be seen in the play, that they're gonna be punting. And Jim and Harry, our designer, came up with this sweet little boat, and you know that big punting stick that they use in Oxford. Well, there was a prop you never want to have to deal with. How many feet was that? Like more than 8?
It was well, that
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
that photo is actually when it was cut down a little bit shorter.
No, we
yeah.
started with, here's where historical accuracy gets you. We looked, oh, hey, how long was that stick?
But you know, if I may, Mark, you know, Mark wrote in this lovely punt moment where they're in this little, you know, boat, and then they punt, and then they get out and have a picnic scene. And then I remember reading it thinking, first of all, we've got to build this boat, and are we just going to use it as a transition? It's like, we're going to have a boat. Let's use it. And it wasn't, it was just like, well, of course. And then, so basically the lovely scene that Mark had written, which was a picnic scene, became they stay in the boat scene. Because it was just, I knew it would be a beautiful thing that we'd want to make use of. And we also utilized it as the very last image of the play. We can get to that later, but it's basically her memory of this wonderful day she had in the past with Prince Leopold, and the punt really was the imagery of that. So it worked out really well. And you know, the wonderful thing about working with Mark is he's so open to input, and we've worked together before, so we have a relationship which is I think very easy. So,
and I'll mention to our audience that this scene is just really beautifully staged with well, there's a ensemble cast of 6 performers in this show. The actor playing Alice and the actor playing Leopold remain those 2 characters, but the other 4 performers play multiple roles. And this was an example of the main characters in this scene are featured in the center, while the other actors are making reeds moving past the boat and swans swimming by. And it was just a delightful scene to watch.
it was a little, you know, I remember, I don't know, Heather, if there's a picture of the whole, everybody on stage during this sequence and that dump of pictures I gave you, but I remember when I first read Mark's script, he had written in this bizarre moment with swans, and I'm like, what the hell? What am I supposed to do with this? And I kind of ignored it for a long time because it frightened me. Then when we got it,
they're nasty creatures.
No, just the idea, like, how am I staging these swans? What are these swans? There's bigger fish to fry. Anyway, once we finally got, you know, Harry's beautiful set design, the tone of this, the whimsy of this sequence, these little, it's hard to describe, but our 2 actors are carrying these little swans, and there's comedy, and it's very sweet, and it's one of the, literally the biggest laugh and reaction. That's probably that's during our dress rehearsal, so things were a little askew. It's hard to see, but our 2 actors on the left of your screen wander about while the mist in there, it's actually was very charming and funny. I mean, even the head of the theater was like, I don't get the swans. What's the swans? And I'm like, it'll be funny, trust me.
Yeah.
All right, so this brings up a question. I know this was a world premiere, but I know that there were also some previous readings to develop the material. And I'm sure your rehearsal process was short, like usually it's about a month. Did you find, guys, that the play was still evolving and changing a bit as you were rehearsing it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's all the difference between, you know, readings and actual production. And you find out, oh, they could never change a costume that fast. What was I thinking? You know, all the stuff that comes out in production, you know, like a punting stick, you know, you don't think how many feet is that going to be, and where are you going to put it backstage?
Yes, but Mark had already done so much work on the script that most of the changes, there were no big plot issues. There were no like, oh my God, this scene needs to go here. All of that played out. It was literally the things he's saying. Simple things like yeah, that transition, she can't get into a new dress. Yeah, maybe that character should say that line, not that one.
Right.
It was
More
a bunch of
technical
little
issues.
technical little things all along the way.
Technical stuff. But
But-
you know, as a playwright, Daniel, you want to get the structure right, you know, and once that's done, once it's absolutely locked, everything else is gravy, you know, changing lines, figuring out costumes, adding time, you know, you just sort of know your building blocks are in place. And I had that, certainly in place when we got to Santa Barbara. I knew that like there wasn't going to be, just from audience reactions and readings, I knew that the storyline held and the events I chose to dramatize were the events in the right order. And that sounds so easy to say, but as you know, that can be months and months of banging your head on the keyboard and, you know, bleeding into it to get that right. And sometimes you don't get it right until you're in the reading or workshop situation, you know, what was I thinking? You know, but you don't want to go into production with that stuff still fluid. You don't want to say, I'll work out the story in rehearsal. Oh God, you know.
Yeah, it happens sometimes, but I'm
Yes,
glad you didn't have to suffer through that.
Yeah. What'd you say, the last thing?
That does happen sometimes, that actors get fresh dialogue, you know, every day.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you know, some shows need a lot of fixing.
Yeah, if it's just dialogue, you're in good shape, really. I mean, you're not going to make friends with the actors, but, you know, but as a writer, you know, well, that's merely dialogue. You know,
Right.
it's when you realize, oh God, that scene shouldn't be at the end. That should be the opening scene or eliminated. That's when you're really sweating.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't even want the actors to know you're having that kind of crisis.
Right. Okay, so this show is a musical, and so
Yeah.
let's talk about the music because it's very different from a typical musical, and the way music is used in this show is unique and very impressive. So to inform the audience, it's an a cappella show, so there's no orchestra, there is no pre-recorded music. All the music is simply sung by the performers live. And if you are a performer or a musician, you might think about this and think, how is that even possible? Are they constantly whipping out a pitch pipe and hitting their note? No, it's like it's the performers find their key through magical secret processes that keep them singing at the right pitch, and it's miraculous. The music that is chosen is incredibly evocative of the period and the place. It really brings to the forefront the kind of musical style of the singing groups of Oxford. The music is largely traditional, but there are a couple of original songs. It all just blends together in a way that just gives this show an unexpectedly marvelous musical style. So having said all that, Mark, do you want to comment on how that approach evolved?
Oh, yeah, you know, it wasn't a full out musical when I first started working on it. I thought, oh, it's gonna have a couple of songs. But all my stuff, whether it's straight play or not, has music in it because I came up as a audition pianist basically when I started in theater and then became a songwriter. So, you know, I always try to keep the musical element in my work. And you know, keeping track of, well, how am I going to get music into this one? And Leopold was musical himself. He joined one of the glee clubs. Also, I can't remember what his instrument was, but he was also in a band. And when I saw that, I went, "Oh, that's it! You know, a glee club." And I couldn't suddenly, you know, ask for 25 actors to fill out a glee club, but I could suggest it. And because we had a really brilliant arranger, Jack Lipson, he could take the 5 or 6 voices and make it sound really full. And the actors were game to learn this really intricate music, part of it just to sound large. And then digging into, well, what would be the songs of the era, the actual repertoire of an Oxford Glee Club in 1872. And, I dug out some Oxford songs. There was one about the chimes. That was very handy. Beautiful Dreamer, was a hit song at the time, even though it was American. Uh, Early One Morning, the English folk song, things like that. And we used them sometimes as sort of movie soundtrack music behind the scene. At one point, when I saw how well this was going, oh, they should do a concert. We should have the Oxford Gentlemen Singers, which they were called, do a full-out concert. And we did 2 songs completely presentational. Bonnie Dundee, and they were both Scottish, and one was a Scottish warriors song, Bonnie Dundee, and the other was Annie Laurie. Yeah, there they are, being Scottish, being all Scottish for this presentation, and we kept the storyline alive because Alice was going to sneak into this concert because, of course, women wouldn't be allowed, and it was a dinner, after dinner music, and she and Leopold conspired that she hide herself somewhere and listen. And Leopold spots her from the stage and begins singing directly to her, Annie Laurie, this beautiful Scottish romantic song. And he finds her, sings to her, and it's a great moment. The music is so beautiful, and Sam's voice equally beautiful. So we had a great moment there.
And Jim, did you find the unique musical style of this show had any particular challenges for you in terms of staging it?
I think it was all challenges. It was, I don't know, maybe I can speak for Mark. I think initially I was naive enough to think, although I had directed musicals before, but I thought, oh, it's a cappella. It's going to be in some ways simpler, but it's deceptively complicated. We had such a short time. A cappella groups rehearse for years to have that tone. We had like less than 4 weeks at the most for a group of wonderful actors, some of which had never sung a cappella before, although that was our fault for not asking him when he auditioned. We only found out later, wait a minute, what? Wait, what? But that being said, and our arranger couldn't really be there till the last week. Luckily, Brent, who played Dean Little, ran the cast through their paces musically. But there was a point halfway through where I was scared to death it was going to be a train wreck. And you know what happens that week or so before a show, everybody bucks up and it all comes together, and opening night was lovely, and they all did an amazing job in such a short period of time. So yeah, a cappella is hard, really hard, but our musical arranger was amazing. The arrangements were beautiful.
Say, would now be a good time to hear the actors talking about how hard that music was in a short video?
Hey!
Great
Excellent.
idea, Heather.
All right, one moment, please.
The music is really fun. Unlike any other show I've ever been a part of. It's all a cappella. There's no instrumentation, which is going to be a massive feat.
It's these incredible arrangements written by both Mark Saltzman and Jack Lipson, and they have worked to take some very, classic Victorian era English ballads and made them even more intricate and complicated than they were back in their own time, as well as some original music kind of hearkening from that same era.
It's a combination of sort of modern a cappella singing with what you would expect of the time. So it's sort of modernizing what you would see a cappella men's choir singing in 1872.
This is the hardest music I think I've ever sung. And I've sung a lot of music, and I've sung a cappella music before, which is what I think is super cool about our show, is that it's all reliant on just the people in the show. Not only do we do these things, that we create these characters and all this other stuff, but then we are responsible for driving the music in this show. And we all become one voice so beautifully, because I think barbershop harmony does that for you. And it's amazing to sing as one voice and then tell this story as one voice too.
What's so nice about it being so complicated is that when we execute it well, it's jaw-dropping. It's going to be incredible for the audience to watch and listen to. And not only on top of this, very difficult 4 and 5 part harmonies that we're doing, we'll also be dancing on top of that. And not even in time sometimes.
Music is so intrinsic. It underlies so much of the action. It does the storytelling for us. It's hard to convey how difficult this is. Part singing with really dense harmonies is so challenging on its own. And then you take away any orchestra or any accompaniment whatsoever, and it's just the singers who are maintaining it all. That is a whole other level of challenge.
That's a great video. So in the play, Alice, who again is 20 years old, she's kind of embarrassed by her fame as the hero of a fairy tale, and sort of trying to leave behind her childhood, and she's very much seen as a young adult. She has this imaginary best friend who is kind of this flamboyant character who slithers around the stage on a divan with wheels. It's just really funny the way it's incorporated into the show. How did the caterpillar become this character in the show?
Well, if you think about the characters in the book, none of them are really very helpful or even polite to Alice. It's I think it's one of the reasons that the Alice stories have been so hard to dramatize. I really can't think of one that you say, oh, well, that's the way to do it. Even Disney kind of, fizzled on that one. There's no relationships between Alice and any of the characters. They're there, they're gone. And as we know in drama, you sort of want, beginning, middle, and endings to relationships, several scenes. But I wanted somebody from Wonderland, to be there. And the caterpillar, even though, insufferable, he did give her advice. He did take a moment, and he wasn't insane, like the characters at the Tea Party, like what help can they be? They're psychotic, but he did, in his supercilious way, tell her, to eat the mushroom. He helped her along her way and solved her problem. And the chapter is even called Advice from a Caterpillar. So I thought, well, when Alice, you usually like a character to have a confidant in a romantic comedy. And I thought, well, that would be a good confidant. She would, from knowing the books, know that, well, the caterpillar did give advice. And in my head, when I need advice from somebody knowledgeable, I imagine I'm talking to the caterpillar. Like we might imagine, if you had a grandparent you were close to and advised you, after the grandparent's gone, you might think, oh, what would Grandpa say? What would he tell me in this? And you imagine the response. So I thought, well, this is an imaginary character. Alice will go to him with her love problems and her schemes for getting on good with the prince. And that was it. I didn't want to start populating with all kinds of Wonderland characters. That wasn't what I was after here. Alice in Wonderland story. It was an Alice Little story, really.
And this piece of furniture is a very funny evolution from a mushroom to a fainting couch.
Yeah.
Jim, were you able to were you a part of that decision, or how did that go?
Yes and no. Yes. I mean, Harry, of course, I think we pretty much from early on decided he'd have to be on some kind of chaise. And then somewhere along the line, I think just for practical reasons, it was going to be put on wheels so it could come off on and off the stage easily. And then I thought, wheels. So this opening number or reveal of the caterpillar is much more like a Las Vegas reveal where, I had him with his back to the audience and the cast spins him around and rolls him over. So I thought, let's take advantage of the fact that we have wheels on this thing and make him a little mobile because, for 85% of the show, he's sitting on stage left on this chaise, that doesn't really move. And he can't really get out of it because he's in this costume that's sewn in. So yes, to our set designer's credit, he came up with that beautiful thing. And then I used the wheels as much as I could because it was a fun thing to do. Yeah.
So let me ask you guys, before embarking on this Alice themed show, what were your interest levels or awareness levels of not just Alice in Wonderland, but of the people behind it, Alice Little, Lewis Carroll, Prince Leopold? Did you have any kind of awareness of these people before the project?
Well, Lewis Carroll for sure. Yeah, early on, even probably your audience here, they know the annotated Alice, the Martin Gardner's book, and I read that, having read the Alice books as a kid, but I guess as a teenager, somewhere I stumbled on that, and I was very young, and it was now I realize, well, that's literary criticism. I was reading at whatever 12 a book of literary criticism. It was so easy to read because the observations are in the margin, and it was so fascinating. I think I just finished and started again, but it's the idea like, oh, did you know that stories have underpinnings and second meanings? No, I did not. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. And I'll find sometimes talking to fellow English majors, that was the seminal book, that we all somehow stumbled on that and could not get enough of it. And then even in school when they're assigning novels and the teachers are sort of discussing it, you sort of know, oh yeah, but there's a layer under that, and there's a layer under that, and so that I think sealed Alice into my heart. Then in the I guess later in life there was a film Dream Child that came out in the 80s, and I was working at Muppets then, and Jim Henson had done the Wonderland characters in that in a very dark and creepy way. I'm a non-Muppet way. He was sort of trying to break out of the Muppet mold and do more challenging kind of darker stuff. And that's where I learned about Alice Little, who was an old lady in that story, coming to America in her for the Lewis Carroll Centennial. And then when Harry and Meghan started being in the news, and unstoppably, there was no escape from Harry and Meghan, and the networks had to fill up the time with trivia about English royals, and someone had said that, oh well, he's not the first English prince to have a romance with a celebrity. And they were talking about his brother and Lily Langtry, a major actress of the day. They had a fling, and they said, oh, and of course his brother with Alice of Alice in Wonderland. What? His brother and Prince Leopold. And now my Alice gear got really intrigued, and yes, there was a rabbit hole, and yes, I jumped into it and found out all of this about Leopold, and his hemophilia and his relationship with his mother, not good. And oh, there's something here. There's something here. You know, why hasn't this story been told? It's so minuscule in his life, or even in her life. You know, like you began by asking, how long did this go on? A year? You know, 18 months. So, you know, in the life of a prince who probably had many affairs before her, and certainly many after he was a royal. And then that's what kicked me off to find out what happened. And as you know, writing historical fiction, you're allowed to fill in the blanks. Actual historians have to really stick with the facts. And if you're reading a history book, the author may say, one can imagine, or it's possible, you know, which they have to be as valid historians. But we don't. You know, Shakespeare didn't when he was writing Henry.
Yeah, you know, history is not a very good playwright. And
Yeah, right.
playwrights are required to tell interesting stories. And if you want to make a documentary, make a documentary. But if you're going to
Yeah.
tell a good story, you're going to have to take liberties. And I think the world is used to that at this point.
You know, I can't think of a historical piece, quote, historical, that doesn't, like, there's any purity to it. You think, you know, even things, you know, the miracle worker, or you know, Henry IV, you know, you know, there was not a Falstaff. He just made that up because he wanted to give him a sort of low life character so he could show him being Prince Al being raised up at the end. And who do we remember most when you think of Henry IV? You know, it's Falstaff, and it's just
And honestly, directing this, I didn't do on purpose. I didn't do a ton of homework because, quite honestly, Mark had done all of it. Secondly, it's historical fiction. Third, and not really first, it's a love story. It's a bittersweet love story. And so to me, my job was finding the humanity and the humor in this lovely play that Mark had written. And I was, of course, relying on Mark for any specifics that need to be addressed regarding Alice, but it wasn't about Alice in Wonderland. It was about Alice Little and her possible love affair. So to me, you know, in some ways, the less I knew, the better, because I wanted to be as objective as possible. And I wanted it to work for me, someone who, yes, I read Alice a long time ago. It wasn't totally fresh in my head. Yes, I knew just enough to be dangerous about Alice, but I didn't know all the ins and outs. I did not immerse myself. And
well, you knew the films, you know, the Disney.
I knew the films. I didn't really like the Disney film, and I was like, you know, so what is this? But I mean, luckily, this story he wrote, it wasn't that. It was about a real woman who existed and had a real, maybe, affair with Prince Leopold, and that's so great. That's the story. Everything else is the research and the writing that Mark had done already.
Well, Jim, you're a very wise man. You were objective in the service of the playwright and the play. So that was very smart of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should hire him for one of yours, Daniel.
Jim, we'll talk.
All right. I'm in the phone book.
At this point, before we give it over to Heather for some question and answer with the audience, gentlemen, is there anything that you were kind of hoping to say today that hasn't been said?
I think we covered a lot, more than I expected. I'll say one thing, just because Heather put up that shot of the voting day, just for this audience. I wanted to make sure that was a golden afternoon. That's why the light looked like that. And the dialogue, you know, being in that situation in the same place in a boat, you know, on the same river, I imagine Alice would reflect on her original river trip when she heard the story, and that Leopold would be interested in that. But I wanted that to look as Lewis Carrollish as it could possibly be, the way he describes the golden afternoon. I wanted the designers to try to emulate that you can imagine in that exact situation, the little sisters and Lewis Carroll in the white tailcoat telling the story.
And unbeknownst to the audience watching the play, there was a stagehand behind that punt, rolling it out and pushing it back, hiding
bending
behind the
way down,
reeds,
way down, with her hands on the back of the punt and
crawling behind
crawling.
it.
And that's the magic of theater.
Wow. I had no idea. That's very impressive.
Yeah, because
Yeah, it became apparent that he could have done it with the stick, but it just was a little bit unpredictable and it looked a little harder. It would be more
really
graceful.
had to work too hard. It wasn't
Which would have been truthful in real life, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't as graceful and elegant looking as it just kind of floating out and floating back.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, Heather, do you have some questions from our audience?
Which leads us to our first audience question. You joked about how the actors began on the right pitch, but seriously, how did they begin on the right pitch?
Well, I mean, it was a combination of things, exactly what Daniel said. I mean, sometimes we worked it in where they would just blow a pitch pipe because they were in an a cappella singing group and they were playing an a cappella, which is what an a cappella singing group would do. And at other times, and I think, Mark, you had worked this out in your head initially, that in the sound of the bells playing in the sound system, that the bells were in pitch with what they were supposed to sing.
Yeah, there's background music of chimes of Oxford.
Right.
Sometimes there'd be the carillons ringing tons of bells, and somehow it would all come down to one bell.
Right.
Ding, ding.
Right.
Ding. Okay.
And the caterpillar, we had to find this damn handbell that was the right. Was it a D? I forget. But he hits that bell.
The D bell, yeah.
Because originally it was just a little bell. It's like, well, why don't we just have the bell that has the right pitch on it? And so we were just trying to sneak it all in.
Yeah, so he's ringing for T, and he happens to be ringing
a D.
A D.
Right.
And he can ring it until he hears it in his ear.
Right.
That's
so brilliant.
Every trick in the book to get those pitches out there.
Whatever worked.
Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, that's how I knew I wasn't really qualified to run this Q&A because that was Rover's first comment was, gosh, how did you do that? That's amazing. Like I didn't question it for a second. I just thought they were all brilliant.
So I perform with a singing group, and anytime I see singers start a song without any audible tone, I mean, maybe they're wearing an electronic earpiece, but if they're not, I always ask myself that question: how did they get their pitch? Did they just have perfect pitch and they carry it around with them all the time? Most people do not. So the way this show sneaks it in, makes it invisible to the audience most of the time, is really clever.
It was hard too, because we discovered that when the actors were moving apart from each other in dance numbers, that's even harder because, a cappella groups need to be close so they can hear each other and hear their pitches continuously through the song so things don't start drifting. And that was a challenge. How do you choreograph it so they can be close enough to each other to hear what they're singing? It's a whole thing, but it worked out.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you don't think about when you're in the office typing on your computer screen. Oh, I better not have them separate on stage or they'll throw each other off pitch.
Right, who knew?
Who knew? Yeah, that's all those little surprises in rehearsal.
Right.
Now, when you were tapping away at that computer writing this, did you know you would only have 6 actors, 5 of the 6 of them playing multiple roles? Or
yeah. I mean, no, I wanted to be produced, and right now, especially post-COVID regional theater, there's no funding for a huge cast. So, they're usually doing pocket musicals, but also, artistically, it's an intimate story. It's not the story of, Les Mis, and a war going on and, multiple storylines. It's just 2 people in really a small town in England, even if it happens to be Oxford, and a love triangle. So I don't know. I mean, for the movie version, we'll of course have a huge cast. I like the I like the intimacy of it. I think it made us come up with interesting solutions that when Queen Victoria also played one of the Oxford singers, and we put a mustache on her and we realized, the audience is having fun watching this. we don't have to tell her to, well, be real, there was something fun about watching this actress, come out in a mustache, it's just somehow delightful. She played it as a man, but she just had fun. Sometimes she would, over masculinate, if that's a
Which was
word.
funny. And so, and our caterpillar also played two roles.
Yeah.
When we rolled him off stage, he got out of that suit and became one of the
And
Oxford
quickly.
singers, and very quickly, which was hard. It was fun, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides the quick changes, Jim, what are the challenges of directing 6 people who are playing multiple roles? Just a few.
There's so many, but I mean, it's basically the basic stuff. It's the transitions, really, to be honest. And that's in some ways what I'm proudest of, is so many of my friends said, how did those transitions? It's like, because the transitions are theater too, and have to be entertaining and have to work, and you have to fool the eye and not look over there, and you're hearing singing, and the lights are changing, and sets are moving, and caterpillars are going off stage, and things are happening. And we didn't really have that much stuff, but we had flying thing. So it's really choreographing the transitions, because blocking a scene to me becomes organic, and but getting people off stage, moving, furniture about, and having it all look elegant and like it's not a train wreck. That's to me the biggest challenge, and that's when you have in some ways the least amount of time, because it's always during tech and you're under pressure and things have got to happen. And but I'm proud of this one. We did, I think, the crew, we had a great crew, and it came off really well.
I think a lot of the audience imagines what a director does is having intimate conversations with their actors. Actually, you spend very little time doing that. What you mostly do is problem solve technical issues.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little different. I mean, I think on a movie, you have very little time, and I direct movies too. In theater, you have 4 weeks to have these conversations, and sometimes I don't have any hair to pull out anymore, but sometimes you do want to pull your hair out because you've had these conversations and the actor is going to bring it later, but you need to see it now so you can actually direct it. So it's this weird balance of trusting they're going to find it, but when the hell are they going to find it? When am I going to see it? Am I going to see it opening night? Maybe.
Yeah. Sometimes. And sometimes I have to say, this is, a romantic comedy.
Right.
If it's a new piece, if you're doing The Odd Couple, everybody knows, oh, I'm going to get a big laugh here and a big laugh here. A new piece, and I've seen this over and over, the actors are skittish about, punching that punchline, because, oh God, if they don't laugh, egg on my face. They don't say this, but you get the sense that they're a little reticent to really deliver this as comedy. If you deliver it as chit chat or underplay it, it's not going to fail. It's that line won't flop. But if you deliver it in the rehearsal room as comedy, it feels awkward. Like what if there's crickets,
but
and you can't tell them, because you haven't done the show yet, you haven't seen it. You can't say, oh yeah, this is going to get a big laugh. You feel it. Like I suspect it will. And then once previews happen and they start getting those laughs and they start holding for them, it's really magical. So you don't want to sort of force it in rehearsal, because they're going to give you a phony thing. But when it organically happens and the audience laughs, and then the next night they really punch into that line, and then the next night they are insufferably hammy.
I know. But you wrote a very deceptively humorous script, because when I initially read it, it doesn't read as funny as it is. I mean, there's a lot of subtle humor that in the wrong hands with the wrong actor wouldn't be funny at all.
Yeah.
But it's all there, and you wrote it in there, and it's a smartly written comedy that isn't. Is it a comedy? I mean, it's a humorous drama. It's hard to catch. You've written a very hybrid story that's funny but moving but musical but it's a cappella, so it's a bunch of things that I think the actors too were discovering in the room. And when we were casting, it's like, oh, remember we met when we found our Alice, like, wow, she's bringing all this humor to it. And you were immediately like, yes. I'm like, oh yeah, the part is funnier than I thought. Or maybe funnier than I thought you thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hear me out. Perfect actress to play Alice Little in the film version, Meghan Markle.
Oh.
Right?
They wouldn't
Well,
they wouldn't even come down the mountain to see the show. And
I
they
know.
were right up there, you know.
Yeah, Go
yeah.
ahead, Jim.
No, I was like, maybe she's brilliant, but I don't know. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm terrible at this audience Q&A, by the way. I'm asking you all of my questions first. But very frivolous question. Montecito and Santa Barbara is very celebrity dense. Did a lot of celebrities come to see your show? Jane Lynch was at the one Rover and I attended. She took part. She asked a lot of questions during the audience talk back, which was fun. Didn't raise her hand, but you know, we'll allow it. So any other famous faces witness it?
Well, if you're a star, you never wait in line, you never raise your hand.
Right. I mean, the one that I met first, and I didn't even see her first, was Meredith Baxter, used to be Meredith Baxter Burney, because our Queen Elizabeth was a huge fan and pointed around. I'm like, oh my God. So I have no shame. I just like walked, and she was in the audience. She came to one of our previews. She was still sitting there. The audience had left. I'm like, all right. So I just walk up to her and drag her up with us. And I just said, you know, I am a fan of hers. I said, hi. Blah, blah, blah. She was really nice. So that's the only celebrity I knew. Anybody else, Mark, that you saw or heard of?
Yeah, well, your Footloose friend.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
Dean Pitchford, who wrote Footloose and Fame and on and on and on. Tons of movie songs, you know. I also worked with him on the Lizzie McGuire movie because I got him to write the finale song for the movie. So we've been friends for a long time. I mean, he lives in Montecito, like right, a block far, not that far away. So he came.
No, we couldn't get Harry and Meghan down, even though, you know, Leopold's his great granddaughter.
Yeah.
You know, so it ran, you know, this celebrity fetish runs in the family.
Yeah.
But no, we kind of tried. That would have been fun, but God, the security, can you imagine?
Yeah, that's true. You would have had to put on a private performance just for them. All right.
And Jane Lynch, by the way, was super enthusiastic during the little
She was.
question and
That's
answer
great.
afterwards.
That's
She was
great.
just really fun.
Yeah,
Nice.
she was great. All right, audience questions. Here we go. You did answer a few during the presentation because people were entering them, you know, as we went. Why did you choose a caterpillar? I feel like we covered that. He gives actual helpful advice. I'm gonna guess the answer to this one is no, but I'm gonna ask it anyway because I know a lot of people are curious. Well, is Lewis Carroll mentioned? Like, was he brought up? And someone specifically wants to know, does the musical incorporate any of Lewis Carroll's puzzles, games, riddles, enigmas, or any other mind activities that were present in the Wonderland world?
Well, no, it's not about him.
Right.
He's referred to because when Leopold's trying to get to know Alice and to know, you know, well, what was the deal, she reflects on him. But, you know, now she's 19, 20. When he's at Oxford, you know, far removed. And this was something from her past. And she considered him, you know, a little odd. She's sympathetic about his speech impediment. But really it's a shrug, you know, it's somebody off stage, and no puzzles or anything like that. It may be something of his spirit. I wrote a couple of songs, original songs for the show, and one of them is called "The Duchess Took Tea at 4," and I kind of tried to channel a little bit of Lewis Carroll when I was writing the lyrics. You know, that there's an archness and the song is telling the story about the invention of tea time. So, you know, tea time pops up in Alice all over the place. And so again, there's influence, but no, I really specifically didn't want to get into the Lewis Carroll as a person. Although one of the things that popped up into this group, I had never imagined that he was so much of an entrepreneur before I worked on this. And the more I got into that, he was really the Walt Disney, or for that matter, Jim Henson of his time. and nobody refers to that. And I always wondered, was there an estate? I mean, all these royalties from all this Alice merch and, you know, productions that was going somewhere. And, you know, at one point the Caterpillar speculates that he might be the richest professor at Oxford, unless the ones who inherited money, you know. And I never hear that mentioned. And certainly for like America media consumers, we would relate to that, you know, that well, here, you know, this is almost an American story, and he started as a mathematics teacher and he built this empire of Alice. And but I never hear him, you know, he was a mathematician, so he certainly knew how to calculate the percentage of a ticket you know, that he would keep. And I'd throw this out to your audience. Does anyone else have knowledge or, you know, even interest in that side of Lewis Carroll?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons why that wasn't a phenomenon. I think the success of the Alice books was a surprise and accidental, and I don't think he thought of himself as a self-marketer or self-promoter. He didn't want to put himself out in the world to promote his stuff. He wanted to be left alone. He was thrilled at the income, and there wasn't very much merchandise created at the time. That biscuit tin is pretty much it. So the big flood of new editions and toys and all that marketing of Alice really came after he was gone. And also copyrights weren't really protected in the same way that they are today back then. So if somebody wanted to, you know, rip off the book in America, for example, and not pay royalties for it, that was very common. So that's why we don't acknowledge him that way.
But he oversaw stage productions in his lifetime, right?
Yes, he did. And I'm sure he got royalties for that.
Okay, so he's out in the world overseeing them, you know, leaving Oxford to oversee a production, which could have toured.
Yeah, I would say his role was probably one of consultant. I don't think he had very much power other than to make suggestions to the playwright and to collect his royalty check.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, but the royalty checks, where did they go? You know, and was there an estate? Who inherited this? And the royalties, knowing the success of Alice in the stage productions, those royalties would have gone past his lifetime to his heirs. If, you know, being an Oxford guy, you know, I mean, a genius, but I imagine he was also smart.
You know, he had a big family. I think when he passed away in 1898, that there was probably a bit of money to be shared. But then the copyright on the book on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland expired in 1907, which wasn't very much time for his family to collect royalties.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And by the way, one of our members is putting together a book of the letters between Saville Clark and Lewis Carroll about that production that was going on when he was.
Well, that might shed some light on this.
Yeah, I think it will. All right, so we're going to finish up here with a few questions about the future of the play. What's happening next? Anything? What do you wish would happen next?
Yeah, Mark, what's happening next?
You know, just, you know, back to show business, back to, you know, just the way our stagehand had to crawl on her knees behind the boat. There's always a part where you're crawling on your knees, and for the next, my last New York show was off Broadway, Romeo and Bernadette, and I'd love this to follow the path to an off-Broadway theater. Fortunately, the New Vic in Santa Barbara was the size of an off-Broadway theater, so we could evaluate it, how this would play in New York. That would be the that feels like a logical next step. If any of our listeners happen to work for a movie studio, we're up for that too.
I always thought it would make a good movie. I think it would.
Yeah.
I concur. Yeah. And I think the answer to this is no, or I would have played it for them. Does any additional audio or video exist, like out on YouTube or anything, that people can see more of the production?
Oh boy.
There was that interview. What was the interview that what radio station recorded them singing for a bit? I'm forgetting what station that
I
was.
think that was NPR.
Was it NPR? I guess it was NPR.
yeah.
Yeah, there was some interview that they did where they did record a bit of the singer singing more, but
More singing, yeah.
I always have to remind people because I'm constantly asked about my work. Oh, where can I see a video of it? You have to realize that videos are basically against the law unless there is some sort of specific contract that rewards all the people who contributed to the making of whatever it is. So the creatives have to have their work protected, the performers. And so if there isn't a specific contract made for the creation of a video, all that work is protected from being released to the world.
yeah.
I think people are so used to going on YouTube and seeing, a college production of even if it's pirated, it's just so accessible now, and it's so hard to control.
Yep.
If you're doing, I don't know, a Neil Simon show in your college production, you just put it up.
Yep.
Maybe the state will be on you, maybe not, but we're just so used to having access to this stuff.
I think the theater did record one night. I think there's an equity rule where you can theater, if it's certain rules, whatever,
Archival,
records one archival record at this camera in one place, probably really wide, and just a record of one night's performance that they keep, under lock and key as their own,
for private use.
for private
use,
reference within the theater,
Yeah.
But that's not available. So,
All right.
yeah.
By the way, we believe there's a lot of Carolians named Mark, but we believe it was probably Mark Davies showed you
Yes,
around
yes,
Oxford,
Mark
the
Davies, that's
author
right.
of Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, Alice in Wonderland, right.
Excellent. All right.
He knew the Thames and all that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's
He was
great.
terrific. I mean, I invited him to come to Santa Barbara. I wanted to know that, after all these years, and COVID intervened between the first workshop and opening night in Santa Barbara. And I can't remember the year I was at Oxford, maybe 2017. It was that long ago that I met with Mark and had that magical day down the rabbit hole.
I'm actually looking, he is not present today. We get a lot of people from the UK tuning in, but I will let him know you gave him a shout out and make sure he checks out this video later.
I remember him so fondly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, both Mark Saltzman,
Thank
Jim
you.
Fall, Daniel Roversinger. Thank you so much for entertaining everyone today and letting them know what goes into staging a production like this. It's very interesting, and as you said, not always what you might think when you're sitting in the audience seeing the magic unfold. And yeah, does anyone have any parting words or?
No, I love the question about the pitches. That was one of my favorite interviews. Somebody was paying attention.
Yeah.
Well,
that was our constant challenge. Yeah.
The magic of theater, is a lot of little technical things that a lot of people just are never aware of, and that's fine with me.
Our job is to make it look easy, and it was anything but.
And you
I
did.
can remember saying, "How are we going to do this? Where are they going to get the pitches?" And sometimes if they were entering singing, that would be easy because they could just hit the pitch pipe off stage and just walk on singing, and that looks magical,
Right.
There's also something intrinsically magical about people singing a cappella. You just as soon as they start singing, that's why to this day those groups are so popular on campuses, and in the kids singing a cappella would be going off and listening to their Lady Gaga and hip hop, but they still want to get out there and sing a cappella. It's sort of
so much of that too dictated how I could block a scene, because we quickly realized, oh no, they have to be closer so they can hear each other. And then of course we've been rehearsing for weeks without microphones on, and they all had a mic on. So you get into the theater and then the acoustics completely are different. They hear different things. It's like, oh my God. So, in some ways it helped because there were speakers backstage for them to be able to hear each other a little bit, but you can only have so much because you get feedback. So it was a constant. We were chasing that through the whole thing. So yeah, it's a very valid question. It was very hard.
Well, I repeat, look magical from the audience. So mission accomplished. And again, thank you again for coming today. And I want to remind everyone that our next event is in just 2 weeks. They're coming fast and furious here, and that's Lewis Carroll's Girls Growing Up Female in Victorian England. So you'll all want to
Okay.
tune in for that. And thanks again, and we will see you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Heather.
tuning in.
Thanks,
Bye
Heather.
now.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye, everybody.